Hi there folks, and welcome to another episode of A to Z of authors from my bookshelf. And today we are on to the letter C, and we are talking about Tracy Chevalier, who has written, I think, a total of 12 books, 5 of which I have read and have here. So I'll be talking a little bit about her and going through her books, and I'll be giving my little reviews on the books that I have read as far as I can remember them. Tracy Chevalier is a very interesting writer. She kind of appeals to me. She writes about quite unique and interesting characters from history, those that tend to kind of be overlooked. They're not usually really important figures in history, but they're quite interesting ones, and so her books do appeal to me. I have to say there are some I like more than others. So let's have a look first at who Tracy Chevalier is. I was interested to learn that Tracy Chevalier was actually born in America, in Washington, D.C. in 1962. She's only a few years younger than me. She was the daughter of a photographer who worked for the Washington Post. But she came to England in 1984 and worked in the publishing industry. And it wasn't until 1997 that she published her first book, The Virgin Blue, which I will be talking about in a minute. But it was her second novel, The Girl with the Pearl Earring, that really brought her into the public eye. It was a bestseller. It sold well over 5 million copies worldwide. And of course, it was adapted into a film in 2003. Starring Scarlett Johansson and Colin Firth. And before I move on too much, Tilly has come to say hello, as usual. And she's gone on to publish several more books that have all been received pretty well. Let's just go through the list of her books. So 1997, yes, where are we going? 1997 was The Virgin Blue, and then of course Girl with the Pearl Earring in 1999. The next one was Falling Angels in 2001, and in 2003 she published The Lady and the Unicorn, which I have here. 2007 was Burning Bright, which I also have. 2009 was Remarkable Creatures. 2013, The Last Runaway. 2016, At the Edge of the Orchard, which I have. 2017, New Boy. 2019, A Single Thread. And just this last year, she published The Glassmaker. I've also included in her list of books an anthology which she edited and also contributed to, Reader, I Married Him, which are stories inspired by Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre. And that was published in 2016. So let's start with the first published one, which I have a copy of and I have read, The Virgin Blue, published in 1997. Now, as I have read this, when I picked it up, I thought, gosh, I cannot remember much about this. And I've sort of looked through the premise and the basic plot, and I thought, yes, I do vaguely remember that. But obviously, it didn't grab me. The premise itself is right up my street. It's a dual timeline. It's a story of two women born centuries apart, and there's an ancestral link between the two women, and the contemporary woman is attempting to research that link. So, right up my street. Bye-bye. The modern part of the story is about a woman called Ellen Turner who moves to France and also changes her name Turner to the original French surname of Tournier and starts to investigate her Tournier ancestry. 400 years earlier, Isabelle de Moulins, with bright red hair, which causes her to be shunned by her village, suspected of witchcraft, and she becomes pregnant and she has to marry into the Tournier family. The modern woman, goes on a journey to find out what happened to her. Now, sounds like a good story. As I say, I don't remember much about it or what I thought about it. Looking at reviews on Goodreads, they are quite mixed. The general consensus seems to be that it's a pretty good read for the first half or 3/4 of the book, and then it gets a bit tiresome. I have to say, as a writer, that 3/4 of the way through is always a difficult part of the book. There's always a bit when you're writing a novel, and it's always around about 3/4 of the way through, that you kind of get stuck. And the writing becomes really slow and you become unsure of it. Sounds to me like that kind of, as a first novel, that difficult patch in the novel ended up being translated actually onto the page, and the last quarter is a little weaker. But, there are quite a few people that gave it 5 stars, but there's quite a lot of people that gave it 3 stars or even less. So as a first novel, obviously not her best, but an enjoyable premise, an enjoyable read for most part of the book. So that's The Virgin Blue. The next book, of course, is Girl with a Pearl Earring, published in 1999, and this, of course, made her name as a novelist. Girl with a Pearl Earring was inspired by, of course, by the painting by Vermeer, painted in the 17th century, of course. I've had a look at Tracy Chevalier's website to see the way she was inspired to write this book. And apparently she'd had a poster of this painting on her wall since the age of 19. And she was looking at it one day and started to wonder what the relationship was between the girl and the painter Vermeer, because there is something about the way she is looking. As she says, she realises she is, after all, looking at him, not at us. And she checked to see that there was absolutely no information about this woman, so that gave her free rein to make something up and to create a story around this woman. And it's a fascinating portrayal of the relationship between the painter and a supposed maidservant called Griette. It's set in 1664 and it's told in first-person narrative from the perspective of the maid herself. It gives us a real description of Vermeer's household of the time and the relationships within that household, and also how the painter's interest in painting this girl and how it affects her and her status as a servant. I really enjoyed it. Again, some of the reviews on Goodreads are a bit mixed. One that really made me laugh a little bit was one reviewer said, "I must admit that I opened this novel expecting to utterly detest the lies it weaves. By page 2, I realised that I was an idiot who should never be listened to." It just made me chuckle. It's just a really good read. It studies human nature, it's compassionate, it's got great historical detail. So it is no wonder that it became a bestseller and was made into a film. And if you haven't read this then and you're interested in that premise, then I do recommend that you read it. Next book, published in 2001, was Falling Angels, and I haven't read this, so I'll just go over the plot really quickly. Set in the early 20th century, between the death of Queen Victoria and the death of Edward VII. It's about two families, and it has the themes of women's suffrage, women's rights. That's about all I know about it. It sounds interesting. Again, slightly mixed reviews on Goodreads, but it does sound like an interesting premise. The next one was published in 2003. It's The Lady and the Unicorn. And again, like Girl with a Pearl Earring, this was based on a famous work of art, this time the tapestry, the famous medieval tapestry, the Unicorn Tapestry, at the Cluny Museum in Paris. So it's therefore set in the 15th century. It begins in 1490, and it's about the family of the man who commissions this set of tapestries, and the man who carries them out, and his relationship with the household, with the people in the household, particularly Jean Levis's daughter, and his pursuit of her. And as it says in some of the descriptions, Nicholas, that's the designer of the tapestry, creates havoc among the women in the house, mother and daughter, servant and lady-in-waiting, before taking his designs north to the Brussels workshop where the tapestries are to be woven. It's about how the creation of these tapestries and these relationships change everybody's lives. Again, I can't remember exactly what I felt about this. Again, it's an interesting premise. I do like the way she takes something like a work of art and creates a story around it. That's always really fascinated me about her work, and I think I enjoyed this. The historical detail is really good. It's very feasible. I would say this is a good one of hers to read if you haven't read any of her books, or not all of them, and if you like that subject matter. Now, the next one is actually my favourite of all of Chevalier's books, although not everybody would agree with me if you look at the reviews on Goodreads, but this is my favourite for two reasons. It was published in 2007 and it's Burning Bright. And the reason I particularly like this one, A, it's set in 18th century London, yay, and B, it involves my favourite poet of my teenage years, William Blake. And of course, the title is from William Blake's famous poem, Tiger, Tiger, Burning Bright in the Forests of the Night. It's not the best historical novel I've ever read, but I did enjoy the story. It's set in 1792. There's a boy who moves with his family from the country into London, and there he meets the very streetwise teenage child, Maggie Butterfield. They form a relationship, and they then become involved in the life of William Blake and his wife, who live nearby. There's a lot going on at the time. There's a lot of unease in London because of the French Revolution going on across the Channel. There are all kinds of threats and problems. They become involved too in the Anstey's circus, and it is Blake who serves as a kind of guide as these young people move from childhood into adulthood. And she sort of echoes William Blake's poetry, the songs of innocence and the songs of experience, as they move from innocence to experience. In quite a clever way. So I think this is more enjoyable probably if you know Blake's works and you see those connections. But you know, again, it's very historically accurate. She does bring in a lot of great details. You feel yourself in 18th century London. So, you know, she does do history very well. Again, mixed reviews on Goodreads, but I liked it. So there you go, Burning Bright. I wonder what you think. The next book, published in 2009, I haven't read. It's Remarkable Creatures. And I like the sound of this. I'd quite like to read this. It's set, it opens in 1810, begins with a sister and brother discovering a strange fossil as they walk along the cliffs in the southeast of England. And this discovery leads to new scientific thinking. It's a major discovery. And again, she looks at the role of women at this period where working class woman is out of step with her community because she is interested in fossils and science, etc. So she looks at those themes. So that sounds really interesting. I think I'd definitely like to read that one. The next one was published in 2013. It's The Last Runaway. Again, an interesting premise. This time it's set in America, and it's about a British woman, a Quaker, who moves to Ohio in the mid-19th century, finds herself very much an alien, very alone, and she becomes involved into a secret network called the Underground Railroad that helps runaway slaves escape to freedom. So again, an interesting premise, interesting bit of history. Wouldn't mind reading that one. The next one, it's published in 2016, At the Edge of the Orchard, which I read not that long ago, obviously before I started doing these videos, otherwise I would have reviewed it, but well within my ability to remember the main plot. Very interesting. Again, set in America. It's about the Goodenough family who came to America and settled where they got stuck in the area known as the Black Swamp in Ohio, and just barely scratch out a living there. And all they do basically is grow apples and make cider. And by the way, just in case you didn't know, in America, I believe I'm right in saying this, that cider is the word used for non-alcoholic drink, called that's basically apple juice. In England, cider is very much an alcoholic drink made from apples, just in case you didn't know that. The parents basically spend their time squabbling, and it's the opening few chapters I found very claustrophobic. And to be honest, a little bit dull, and I found it didn't really get going until the son, Robert, leaves home and decides to seek a new life, new fortune in California, where he becomes kind of interested and almost obsessed by the trees, the redwoods and the sequoias of Gold Rush, California. And he tries to forget his past, but it kind of catches up with him. And the book involves some real historical characters, such as Johnny Appleseed, who used to provide the apple seeds for people growing apples, and he makes an appearance several times. At the beginning of the book, he provides the seeds for the family. So it's very, very interesting piece of American history, really. As I say, I found it a bit tough going at the beginning, but I really got into it in the sort of second half of the novel. So again, she does find sort of interesting bits of history to write about. So that's At the Edge of the Orchard. In that same year, in 2016, Tracy Chevalier became the editor of the book called Reader, I Married Him, which is a selection of short stories inspired by that very line in Jane Eyre, Reader, I Married Him. And it's got quite a good list of writers. Tracy Chevalier herself is featured in it, and it includes such writers as Helen Dunmore, Susan Hill, Sally Vickers, Audrey Nithenegger, and others. So it's a pretty good lineup and sounds pretty interesting. The next book, published in 2017, was New Boy. Very different this time, set in the 1970s. It's about the son of a diplomat, Ose Kokoti, who tries to form a relationship with the most popular girl in his school, which incurs the jealousy of another student, and how all that changes their lives. Basically, it's Shakespeare's Othello set in a 1970s Washington schoolyard. And that's all I know about it, but it sounds very interesting. The next one, published in 2019, was A Single Thread. We're back in England for this one, and it's set between the two wars, the First World War and the Second World War. And it's about a woman who, after the First World War, like so many women, seemed doomed to spinsterhood because so many of the young men were killed in that war. And she settles in Winchester, where she meets a community of women who embroider the kneelers in Winchester Cathedral. And basically it's about their relationships and how she is going to form her new life as a single person and as the next war starts to loom. So that's basically what I've picked up from the description. Again, sounds an interesting premise. Would like to read. The last one, published just this year, in 2024, is The Glassmaker. This looks really interesting, and in actual fact, interestingly, it has the best reviews on Goodreads that I've seen. This time it's set in Venice, and in medieval Venice, on the island of Murano, where they make that beautiful glass. And the main character is the daughter of a glassmaker, family of glassmakers. And again, it's about how women fit into work and their status and what's expected of them in that period. And it's about the family and how they move through difficult times, plague and war, etc. Another one I would like to read, and I'm sure that the historical details of the glassmaking, etc., is going to be pretty exquisite in that one. So there you are. That's my video on Tracy Chevalier. She's not my favourite author, but there is something about her books. I am very much drawn to them for the historical accuracy, the way she writes about the lesser-known historical figures, her writing about women. People tend to like her or love her, you know. I find she doesn't seem to be everybody's cup of tea. And as I say, you know, some of her books I have definitely liked more than others. And I think if you like historical novels, she's definitely worth dipping into if you haven't read any of hers before. And that whole selection can give you a very wide range of periods, places, to find what might be your favourite book to pick up to start with. So let me know what you think about Tracy Chevalier, which books of hers you prefer too. If you want to see one of my other A to Zs, one will be coming up right here. I think we'll still be in the seas for the next one. As for my next video, now I did promise a book review for the Stephen King I'm reading. I'm not absolutely sure that I am going to be able to get that done by Halloween. Just to let you know, I had my flu and COVID jab last weekend, and I'm still actually really knocked out from it, basically. And so my reading has been a lot slower than I'd like. You know, reading with a headache. Yeah. So I really wanted to be able to review that by Halloween, but I'm not absolutely sure. But if not, I will definitely have a little treat for you for the Halloween period. So, from me and Tilly. What? Nothing going on out there. From me and Tilly. Thank you for watching. Do please subscribe for more book reviews, A to Z of authors, book lists, etc. All things bookish. I will look forward to seeing you again very soon. Bye for now.